joined with the CEO of MACH Energy, Jon Moeller. So Jon, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Jason. Pleasure to be here.
So tell me a little bit about MACH Energy.
Sure. So we're modern energy management software for commercial buildings. And so we're 15 years old, and we've worked with a number of commercial buildings across the country. We're basically taking meter data and providing analytics and reporting on top of that. So typically our customers save 5 to 10% with no capital projects, and they save a lot of time on reporting and tenant billing and other forecasting. So we're not new technology, but what is new is us talking and being approached by suppliers and retailers and utilities that want to use this type of technology with their commercial customers, and we did some joint meetings with DNV, and I think that's why we're here today.
And so when you're thinking about some of those customers, what's the narrative so the utilities, the retailers have a sense of what information or insight they're trying to gain, but when you're actually approaching the commercial buildings, the commercial customers, what's that narrative that you describe to them for the value that this type of information and insight can provide?
Well, yeah, I mean, a lot of it's similar to some of the themes we're seeing today. It's a digital transformation. People have a lot of times been managing their energy spend using paper-based bills, Excel, very much a lack of granularity. And so what we're providing is visibility into all that, sort of modernizing their energy management program, if you will.
Wow. What would you say was some of the inspiration behind developing this type of service?
Yeah, again, it's interesting. So our founders came out of the retail and utility world, PG&E and Sempra and New Energy Ventures, and so they were working in the Wild West in the 90s, late 90s, as California was becoming deregulated, and there's a lot more interval data out there, meter-based data. A lot of these meters were being installed, and so what they found was that there's significant savings potential if you actually dug into that data. And a lot of people were more concerned just with the procurement agreement, but then moving into focusing on it operationally, they wanted to. They thought that was a bigger opportunity. It's 5 to 10% or 15% in some cases savings without any capital projects. So these folks, the ACH and MACH, they went off and were doing a lot of whiteboarding and typical California type thing. They brought in a guy M, who was a PG&E utility expert, and so that was the founding team. And we, way back when, this was 2002, they founded a SaaS company. So we were one of the first, there was a few back then, SaaS companies. And when I joined in 9 years ago, we actually owned the servers, and so I visited the server farm a few times. And we no longer, of course, own any servers, but for a while we actually had a cage, and someone could have done damage to us by unplugging those servers. But that was so we've been doing it a long time. But like I said, the demand now is really catching up because people are using their phones frequently. They're accustomed to better analytics and better data.
Right. And so you've been doing this for a long time, so you've had sort of that historical look back. Looking towards the future, and I know there are some industry trends that you've been looking at. One in particular that I'm curious to get your opinion on is about AMI meter installations. And you're sort of seeing two simultaneous trends where there is a large rollout. I think it's something like almost 50% of consumers in the U.S. have AMI,
right,
or have meters installed. But then recently in Massachusetts, the PUC ruled that they actually didn't want to install, they didn't want to confirm or allow AMI installation by Eversource or National Grid. They're taking a pause on it.
Right.
So from a trend standpoint, how do you see AMI and collecting that interval data continuing, but also running into some regulatory barriers?
Yeah, that's interesting. As we've been talking to utilities for the last year or so, and as we actually were just in Massachusetts, and I learned that we had an Eversource person present at our offsite. I think we're going to start to be part of the solution, and so we've had a couple of meetings where people were like, "Hey, we're trying to build a case for our AMI deployment, and what is the benefit to the consumer?" Right? There's a big benefits to smart meters for the utility, but what are we going to do after we have that data? And that's where we come in, because we're going to take that data and analyze it and provide savings opportunities and automation. So yeah, we're pretty excited about that because only 50% have it now. We don't. We've been doing this a long time, though. There's a lot of different ways to get the data, so it doesn't necessarily have to be only AMI. And there's a lot of legacy systems out there. Like EverSource has a legacy system for integral data, and so we can still help people in the meantime. But that's the big opportunity is these smart meter deployments.
Yeah, and I think making that narrative around the value at the customer level, I think that a lot of utility commissions may not understand that, or that it's information that they're still digesting, and your type of company is able to come in and present that information or show them that there is value, not just at the utility level, but at the customer level as well. So in thinking about where the trends of this industry are going, if we were to look out, whether it's 18 months, maybe a couple of years into the future, where do you see this transition, the availability of data, what you're able to provide, and insight you're able to provide from that data? Where do you see that going?
Well, I mean, we're seeing more and more use of technology. I mean, that's only going to continue. We're serving property managers, facility managers, corporate managers. And what we found is that the demographics are changing. Those are historically, I think the average age in property management is, over 50. And so as folks retire, the younger generation is more accustomed to software. So we're seeing nothing but more and more deployment. What we also see that there's probably, this helps our story, but just generally speaking, is more automation. Because while folks are retiring, they're not necessarily being able to find younger people to join the ranks, and everyone wants to be in a startup or something versus manage a building, and so people are going to have to use technology to automate their processes. And the classic example is someone gets promoted because the facility manager across the street left, so now you have 4 buildings to manage instead of 2, and we're going to see more and more of that and more use of technology. In terms of, they mentioned this yesterday. I think Stephen from Direct Energy, he said that an employee costs $300 a square foot versus energy, which is $3 or $4 a square foot. And so some of our customers are starting to ask about, like, hey, how can we ensure that our employees are healthy? And so we're seeing air quality monitoring, CPS Energy Utility in San Antonio is doing that kind of thing. So I think we'll see more of that. Savings is obviously important, but we're also seeing pull from customers for risk mitigation, so air quality, of course. But we have real-time alerts that we can send people. And I was demoing it to an asset manager, and he said, "Hey, this is great and all. I want to save money, but what I really, I really don't want to get fired. And if this building burns down, that could happen." And so he was more interested in preventative maintenance and alerts that would tell him if equipment went down, on the weekend, or tell his team, or maybe there's a power outage or something like that. And so risk mitigation, people are moving from savings, yes, but also we have hurricanes and things like that. That's a big concern for us, for these owners.
And how has the market, so like some of these owners, how's the market responded to this type of technology? What type of feedback have you been receiving? And are there any lessons learned thus far that people who perhaps haven't deployed this, or they're thinking about getting involved in this, that some lessons learned that they might be able to take from your experience?
Yeah, so we've been doing this a long time. We've been very customer focused, and so our customers have helped us develop this. I think that's why we've gotten good feedback from DNV and others and the utilities, because it's really built from the customer perspective. And so about 5 years ago, we realized maybe we went a little too far. And so we were taking every piece of feedback and putting it in the software, and we ended up having 37 screens.
Wow.
And so we've really done a good job, I think, of ensuring that we have a very clean interface that's very intuitive. We work very hard on that, but then we also have deep analytics that we combine with that. So the analytics, the main question that people would ask is, like, okay, now I have this visibility, but what am I going to do with it?
Right.
And so we've developed something, we call it initiatives. And what initiatives do is it benchmarks building against other buildings, against itself. It quantifies the potential opportunities. We have a utility tariff engine built into our system, and so it can give dollars, actually. And so it answers that question: what am I supposed to do with this data? Because I have AMI, we got the rate case done. Now we have some software, but really, that's all well and good. What are we really going to do with this? And so these initiatives help answer that question. And because we've been doing this a long time, so it helps identify potential savings opportunities. People then can adopt them, and then our system will track it automatically. Because if there's no sort of feedback loop, it's not very worthwhile.
Right.
So we've had to learn all this because making mistakes over the years.
And I feel like having that feedback loop is part of that persistent engagement that I know you mentioned before about
Right.
not just a one-time shot going into the building, giving people information about their building, but keeping them interested, keeping them involved. So I
Right.
was wondering if you could talk about how do you keep people interested?
Yeah, so that's a good point. So it is persistent engagement, and so these initiatives, we're tracking progress, and so we send out weekly reports, or it could be monthly, and so it's giving people positive feedback, hopefully, or negative feedback, but feedback nonetheless lets them know if they're making progress or not. Then when it's closed, um, they'll get another email that says, "Hey, you finished this up," and we have a lot of reporting. So we have a customer where every building was requested to adopt some initiatives, and so at the end of the year they saved like $500,000, and they were able to run a report that showed, hey, this building saved the most, this saved the least, and they could so that the technology also, if the behavior returns, it will catch it. So it's sort of an insurance policy because we want it to be persistent. So
If it reverts back to some consumption patterns that were perhaps using more energy
Yeah.
before, then you're able to flag that and say, hey, you guys are reverting back to a higher consumption level. Just be aware that that's happening.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So we have a series of alerts. I mean, we've alerts like that for more like senior level folks, and what we found is that you have to have at the consumer level, customer level, there's different roles, and so an operating engineer is going to have very different needs than versus a facilities manager or a property or a portfolio manager. So different reports to make sure that people stay on track. And so a portfolio manager, a utility account manager, a supplier account manager, they're going to have more high level monthly type reports to make sure that things stay within budget. And we have a lot of automated budget variance, but then there's also real-time alerts people can get. We have a DR widget that people can use to manage their demand or their demand response events in real time with text message alerts and things like that. So what we've found is having push reports is critical because everyone, particularly with the demographic change and fewer people doing these jobs, no one's just sitting or looking at the MACH energy site all day. They need to be pushed out relevant data when it's actionable.
Excellent. I got one last question. You mentioned something that I wanted to come back to. You said that you received a lot of feedback, and you at one point had 37 different either graphs or streams of information.
Yeah.
And something that this industry right now is facing is that we're awash in data, and
Right.
it's very tempting to throw everything plus the kitchen sink at some of the customers. So how do you parse through all that feedback? How do you parse through the 37 different options to figure out what is actually the 2 or 3 that the customer really values? How can people whittle down all of the information to some key findings that customers would be engaged with?
So yeah, I mean that's a lot of the rationale behind these user types that we have. So one of the first questions when we get people online is who are you? And then we have de facto dashboards and widgets that are designed basically to help that person. So an operating engineer is not going to get a portfolio level report, right? They're automatically going to get real-time access, alerts that are already set up for them, daily alerts, or if they want it intraday. A property manager, we're going to say, hey, is Energy Star important to you? There's all these ordinances around the country. So a lot of times these end users are more concerned with it. Sometimes they're more concerned with their Energy Star score than their sort of their budget. So it really comes down to that user and just giving them. We still have a lot of functionality, but we don't give. Before we do a 2-hour training session. Now it's a much shorter and more precise training session based on that actual user.
Excellent. Well, Jon Moeller, CEO of MACH Energy, thank you so much for joining us.
Okay, thanks for having us.